Right, lots to talk to Mark Regev, Senior Advisor to the Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Israeli Ambassador to the UK. Always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for joining us, Mr Ambassador. Just want to talk about the reasonableness bill to start with. It could have removed checks and balances from the judiciary in your country. The Supreme Court, correct me if I'm wrong at any stage, has ruled that the court still has ultimate say. What does the government think about that?
So we in the government haven't yet put out any sort of formal announcement in response to the decision of the court. I think the Prime Minister spoke a few days before the court's decision, and he said, of course, on this issue there are differences of opinion, but he said it's not the time now. It's the time to focus on winning the war against Hamas, on national unity. Ultimately, Kay, when Hamas stormed our border and started murdering our people, doing terrible things, as you know well. They beheaded, they raped, they massacred the young people at the music festival. Hamas didn't ask people if they were for or against judicial reform. They didn't ask people, are you for Mr. Netanyahu? Are you against Mr. Netanyahu? They didn't ask you, are you of the left or the right? Are you religious? Are you secular? They murdered brutally everyone they came across. And I think it's important we remember that, and it's crucial that we win this war against Hamas, as we will.
Is he going to abide by the Supreme Court's decision?
Once again, we're now focusing on winning this war. It's not on the agenda of the government. The Justice Minister has said so, that we will not deal with these issues. This is a time for national unity. The issue was very divisive, as you will recall. We're focusing now on winning this war. That's the only priority we have today.
But if he decides that he doesn't want to accept what the Supreme Court has said, then the military, the police, could be forced to decide whose rule of law they want to obey.
I just don't think that's on the agenda at all today, Kay. You've got to understand, every day Israelis are waking up and there are casualties of our soldiers who are fighting in Gaza. And on New Year's Eve, when you in London were celebrating and people were celebrating around the world, we had a barrage of some 30 rockets that came from Gaza into Israeli cities in the south, in the center, including where I live. So instead of seeing fireworks, we saw incoming rockets, and we saw interceptors coming out to destroy those rockets so people wouldn't get killed. It's a different reality here. We have to win this war against Hamas. That is our priority.
And what was New Year like for your military?
Well, we are continuing to move ahead. Obviously, to receive a rocket barrage at midnight on New Year's Eve was not nice for the Israeli civilian population. But the military operation against Hamas continues to move forward. Just yesterday, we took out a senior Hamas commander in central Gaza, one who was directly responsible for the atrocities on October 7th, for the massacre of innocent civilians. We are seeing that Hamas's military machine is beginning to break. We're seeing more and more Hamas fighters surrender. I think it's only a matter of time before we win this, but we have to be patient. We have to be ready for the long haul.
Why are you withdrawing some of your troops from Gaza? What does that mean in this latest stage of the war?
Okay, precisely because I said we have to be ready for the long haul, because this is not a sprint, this is going to be a marathon. And we have to take troops out now to rest them, let them come out of combat for a while so they can go in later as other troops come in. We have to be able to rotate our troops in and out as is needed. We want this to be over early. We'd like this to be over tomorrow if possible. But we know that Hamas is a fanatical enemy. We have to be ready for a fight, and there's no point having a Band-Aid solution. We haven't gone through all this just to be back to square one. This has to end with the destruction of Hamas's military machine and the end of its political control over the Gaza Strip. Gaza should no longer be allowed to be this terror enclave that threatens its neighbors.
What does the long haul look like?
Well, it'll demand a price from Israeli society. It means the rockets are going to continue to come in, though we've seen the number being reduced as we've been destroying Hamas's military capabilities. It means our soldiers will continue to fight, and some of them, unfortunately, will be dying in Gaza in this battle against Hamas. But I think there's a consensus in Israeli society, across the board, from left to right, that Hamas is a brutal, evil enemy, someone who openly says that they don't believe in reconciliation or peace with Israel, someone who openly says that given the opportunity, they would do the October 7th massacre again and again and again. Their words, Kay, you've heard them say it. We have to defeat them. We have to destroy this terror enclave on our southern border. There's no choice.
How long do you think the Israeli people can stomach that sort of war? Weeks, months, years?
I think the Israeli people, would like this to be over as soon as possible, as would I personally. But it's important that this is done properly. It's important that this is done with a decisive victory for Israel. And I can tell you, you visit the homes of bereaved families of soldiers who were killed in this war, and the message you hear from their parents, from their brothers, from their sisters, is we don't want our young boy to have died in vain. This has to be won. Follow through. Finish the job. Never again should Hamas be allowed to come across the frontier and butcher our people the way they did on October 7th. We have to come out of this with a new reality. I think that's the feeling in Israel.
And the innocents that are paying the price in Gaza, the latest figures were suggesting more than 20,000 people have died.
Yeah, and this is a war that Israel didn't want. This is a war that Israel didn't plan. This is a war that we're responding to Hamas's attack on us. And this could be all over tomorrow. This could all be over today. If Hamas listened to what the government of Israel is saying, they're saying, you can either die in battle, Hamas, or you can surrender. If you surrender, it can be over straight away, and then no one has to suffer from this terrible war, not Israeli or Palestinians.
When do you start to give up hope for those that are being held hostage in the tunnels? We've seen the videos, especially the elderly and the very young. They're not coping well.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. The hostages that are being held in Gaza, it's living hell for their families. And of course, we have to can only think, we can only imagine what the hostages themselves, as you indicate in your question, what they are going through. We saw the sort of violence, brutality that Hamas is capable of on October 7th, and the stories that we received from the hostages that were released in November, who were only some 50 days in Hamas as hostages, held by Hamas in Gaza as hostages. I mean, the people there at the moment, they're over 80 days. And we heard there was a gripping interview with the head of the psychiatric department of the Children's Hospital, and she talked about the sort of abuse these children suffered. They were forced to take psychological drugs, psychiatric drugs, the children. They were forced to see their mothers undue sexual abuse. They were forced to watch terrible, horrific movies of the massacre of October 7th again and again and again. These Hamas killers, to be in their captivity, must be living hell. And of course, their families are going through a terrible time knowing what their loved ones must be going through.
Does your heart also bleed for the Gazan innocents whose only crime is their birthplace?
Of course. We don't want to see a single innocent civilian caught up in the crossfire. And of course, we want to see the end of all this bloodshed, but it's impossible, it's crucial that we finish this the right way with the defeat of Hamas, because if Hamas stays in power, we'll all be back to square one, and then you'll just see more brutality, more violence in the future. You'll see more attacks on Israel and the need for us to respond and more death in Gaza. It's better that this is done properly and this is finished in the right way and that Hamas is removed from power. Anything short of that is just a recipe for more violence, more bloodshed, more suffering further down the line.
Mr. Ambassador, let me end where I started. If Mr. Netanyahu accepts the ruling of the Supreme Court, he faces rebellion from the far right of his government and possibly resignations as well.
No.
No, you don't think that's going to happen? A constitutional crisis in the middle of an ongoing war is what he's facing.
No, I don't think we're going to have any sort of constitutional crisis because the government has said we're not going to deal with this issue now. We're focusing on winning this war. We're focused on national unity. Look, Israelis, like British people, we love to argue our politics. We debate our politics passionately. But we also understand this is a time of national crisis. This is a time of national emergency. We've got a brutal enemy that has to be defeated. And I think, as I said, all Israelis across the political spectrum understand that, and the issues that divide us are being put aside now for what unites us, and that is the goal, victory over Hamas. We have to defeat this brutal, callous, horrific terrorist organization, which has been responsible for the most gruesome violence against our civilians, against children. I mean, they beheaded, they burned people alive, they machine gunned the young people at the music festival. These are people, once again, they don't care how you vote, they don't care what you think, they kill you because you're an Israeli, and we have to defeat them.
Mr. Ambassador, we must leave it there. Thank you for taking the time, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Nicole standing by in Jerusalem.